gee, I wonder if George Lucas borrowed a little bit from that in 1976 to come up with Darth Vader. Meaning, yes, that's where Darth Vader comes from. World War I, German soldiers with gas masks. And elite soldiers, they were called shock troops in Germany. The Germans called them stormtroopers. That's all from World War I. So that was very much, in fact, so much was taken from that. And that it does make them just look alien, doesn't it? I think that's a really clever look. And notice the horse's gas mask? So many horses, millions of horses would be killed in this war. Just chewed up animals. And you can imagine why. And so this was a brutal, horrible war. We still have elements of the old, but with all the weapons of the modern world. And this is now basically our world. A few technological differences, but it's our world now. And everything will change. So we got to get to, oh, almost forgot, I love this map. They have all these maps. This was a style to draw caricatures of countries in Europe. All kinds of little figures, and so there's a bunch of them. That's one of the things I really like about teaching European history. I could talk about all these, so I got an excuse to show them. So I love this map, how they drew little faces. So you have the massive Russia, Germany with the bayonet in the nose, France, Austria with the rifle in the mouth. Look how they draw Greece. Nobody likes Serbia. We got a pig. It's like Portugal, we got tired. We're done, no Portugal. I like Corsica. Belgium's a pistol pointed at England. All those things kind of fit together. I'll show you one more, but that was the style. That's kind of creepy, Italy. So let's get to the factors that led to war. So we got to do a little bit of European history because this would change so much. And the first factor is industrialization. And many of the same things that happened in the United States, and sometimes at even a greater scale, was happening all over Europe. I want to forget one more thing about the war. I told you how awful it was. The United States, in reality, only fully fought, with full American armies, 3 months. 3 months in World War I. So that's the last 3 months of 1918. 120,000 Americans died. 5 times that number would be wounded. That should give you an idea how brutal this war was. Absolutely horrific. And so, industrialization, the same problems that were happening, and benefits that were happening from the Industrial Revolution were happening here. That's Manchester, and the coal smoke. In fact, whenever they show pictures of the effects of the Industrial Revolution, they have to show English towns, because they have the long estimates, dirty and grimy. And they still kind of look like this. It's really interesting. And since it's black and white photos, makes it even look dirtier. But remember all the inequalities, all the changes. But whoever has the capital has the profit. And this was happening all over Europe too. They were getting richer, and because of the wage system, wages at first were pretty good, and then they started becoming stagnant. Part of the reason why so many people left industrialized Britain and went to America, then industrialized Germany and went to America. But it's not just inequalities there. It's inequalities of smaller countries that didn't industrialize. They were at the mercy of countries who had industrialized and had all the technological advantages. So all kinds of inequalities. And I should add that you have those who don't have power, workers of these small countries, or ethnic groups that are swallowed up by larger empires. And get something about the people who don't have, the have-nots, they want power. They want power. They want political power, economic power. They want their own country. Why do you think there's so, we're coming to that. And that's why we had so many, the labor issues in the United States. People wanted a better life and they want control of their own life. The world was changing dramatically. And it's no coincidence that you have, like we've talked about before, the rise of socialism and communism. And that fear of revolution might happen. And don't forget, who was assassinating and bombing everybody? Yeah, those bomb-throwing anarchists. Oops. You have a wave of assassination from the Tsar of Russia being blown up, a bomb put in the French National Assembly. President of the U.S. assassinated. emperors of Austria assassinated. All kinds of attempts. There was a real feeling that Armageddon was coming. Armageddon, they talked about it all the time. There will be war, and it probably will be revolution. And there'll be this whole genre of books about the war coming. It's coming. You saw the same thing in the 50s. In the 30s, a little bit about war coming. And then in the 50s and 60s, Cold War and nuclear annihilation. A bunch of movies about that. So this is not a new thing. And Frederick Miter was this artist, pretty amazing artist, and he's one of the best examples. It's hard to tell, but he made these apocalyptic paintings where he almost threw the paint at it. And this is war and that's city. And they're pretty scary photos of paintings before World War I trying to show his vision of the apocalypse that was coming. And he would sit and not sleep and probably take a lot of chemicals and then draw these. And okay, my sister-in-law married a Berliner, so she lives in Berlin. And when I've been to Berlin a few times then, and they had a exhibition of his art. And I'd heard about him, so I wanted to go see it. And you see these flat pictures, right? You know, that's flat. It's kind of, oh, that's kind of scary, but it's still flat. It's so much different when you see it live. Because it's just oil paint. And oil paint has a thickness, has a density. And you can see, imagine throwing the paint and then going the brushes all over. So it gave it a texture and a thickness. That's one of the reasons why, if you want to appreciate art, you really have to go to an art museum. It's, go to a gallery, especially like Impressionist art. It's just, you can just see it glopped on there. You know who Van Gogh is? See a Van Gogh live. It is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It's unreal. So that's my advice. I like it. So not all, but I like this. And it was really scared. I remember that one wasn't there, but this one was. And it just kind of gave you this density. It was really scary. So you had this feeling it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, why not just do it now? Which is a pretty fatalistic and scary attitude. Next, this changing, dynamic world. And you still have these 17th century monarchs who think they're ruling like it's 17th or 1650 or even earlier, and they're medieval kings. And they're trying to hold on to their old powers as there's going to be new countries. They want new constitutions and power. There's all this new economic change. And so you have these strange situations where you have monarchs and plumes and crowns and capes riding around in cars. It's just this surreal thing. And this is a classic example, too, of the problem with monarchs. Those are all royal families. Some are monarchs all over Europe at the Diamond Jubilee of her reign. Anybody know what that is? That's Queen Victoria of Britain. And Empress Victoria because of India, but Queen Victoria. And those are all related to her. And you're stuck then with whoever becomes the next monarch, who's ever next in line. And think about it for a second. You have these royal families. If they have children, you got to marry somebody of that same stature, right? So you have cousins marrying cousins. Queen Victoria, for example, was a carrier of a little genetic defect called hemophilia. And so a few of her relatives would have that. That would have being impacted in kind of a large country. His country. Who's that? That's her. That's her first cousin, her second cousin, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, who married Victoria's niece. I know, cousin marrying cousins, right? See that face? That's Victoria's grandson, George. First cousin. So this is her son, Edward. He would be king for a very short time, then pass away to go to George. This is her cousin, Frederick William of Russia, of Germany, but he would die. He married her daughter, so their kid would become Emperor of Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II, grandson of Queen Victoria. See the issue here? They're all interrelated. They're all intermarried. And monarchies, you're stuck with whoever's next. So you might get one that's smart, or you might get an inbred, insecure fool who looks looks like a horse. Don't they all kind of vaguely look like a horse? And so, we'll get to him. They're all related. You're stuck with whomever. Now, some are constitutional monarchies like England. Germany had a constitution, but the Kaiser had great power. And in Russia, he was the absolute ruler of Russia, of all the Russians, like a god. So you have different degrees. France is a republic. So, Kaiser Wilhelm II is a classic example of all the problems that come with monarchies. He was insecure from day one. And I do have a little bit of sympathy for him, but he really was just this horrible man who made terrible blunders, and everybody hated him. But can you see what the source of, okay, monarchs are always going to be insecure, because, you know, they look at their dad who's the king, you know, that kind of thing. But do you see where it's source of insecurities? Look at him reviewing his troops. That's before World War I. See it? In childbirth, he was a breech birth. The arm got wedged behind him when they pulled him out. It horribly mutilated his shoulder, dislocated and ripped it up. And so his left arm never grew. It was about 2/3 as long. His hand was about 2/3 as big, a little tiny, just basically a bone. Couldn't really do much with it. And it caused a discomfort, but it wasn't horrific. It was awful. I mean, you had to deal with it. But he had everything tailored and always keep it bent, holding something. So you couldn't really see how short it was, because you always had it bent somewhere. So you notice how he's walking like this. And always holding something. You couldn't see how small his hand was. And he spent his entire life trying to overcompensate for that. German emperors were supposed to be great warriors. And yet he had this withered arm. And so when he was young, a little boy, he would go through unbelievable torture to try to get him to compensate for this harm. He would be beaten severely, especially about riding a horse. You can imagine how much trouble we had riding a horse with me one hand as a little kid. Especially this is not going to be a small horse. And he would fall off, he'd get kicked, he'd be whipped and beaten by his tutor. And he would spend his whole life like that. Just absolute misery. And then all of a sudden, a young man, he's emperor. Now, he went to the military academy. All sons of monarchs go to military academy. So like anything about the princes of England, they're all military people. That's the way they have to be. But as a young man, he became the emperor. He always wore uniforms and always compensated for this. And so think about this insecure guy who's always thinking, you can't make fun of me. You can't make fun of my withered arm because I have the strongest army in the world. And I'm not afraid to use it. That's scary. He worked his right arm until he was incredibly strong. He would chop wood for hours. One arm, chop wood. So someone put a log on, chop it. You know, so a servant would do it, he just chop until his right arm was incredibly powerful. And he did this every day. And so he would do this. Let me give you an idea of insecurity was, what kind of his mental state. He would walk up to certain people, just kind of random. He would shake their hand. And, you know, shaking hands with this, well, Kaiser means Tsar, or Kaiser means emperor. Kaiser, but where does the word come from? No. Caesar. But actually, Caesar, if you say it in Latin, is Kaiser. That's Kaiser. Tsar, Kaiser. It's all means Caesar, emperor. He would grab someone's hand and start squeezing as hard as he could, bring tears to their eyes. And he'd be there talking to someone else and just holding it. Sometimes he'd bring them down to their knees. Sometimes he would break knuckles. And that man has the strongest army in the world. I want you to just ponder that for a second. That's just an example of his insecurities. And that's who Germany was stuck with. And he offended everybody in Europe his first 20 years as emperor, to where nobody trusted him and everybody feared him, which he thought was cool. Yeah, they feared him. He would die in 1942 in the Netherlands. Next, give me another example. I don't know why I put Archduke Karl, I don't put Archduke, but I just want to give another example of these ancient monarchs. There's Kaiser. Sometimes you see him as emperor, but Kaiser Franz Joseph of Austria, another Germanic empire ran by Germans, and he had been emperor since 1848. He would die in 1916. And he was this old man who was desperate to hold on to this empire. And he still thought I could hold on to this decrepit empire. In fact, he outlived his sons. His wife was assassinated. His uncle, or sorry, his nephew died, and finally his great nephew would finally succeed him. And he had this huge multi-ethnic nation called Austria-Hungary. He was the emperor. He was the emperor of Austria, king of Hungary. You remember the boom bust cycle? You start going into that overproduction. Prices begin to drop. What does every company do to try to make up the difference when prices drop? And that's what he did with an empire that was dying. Take more land. Thinking that will make us stronger. We just take one more small neighbor, we'll become stronger. And that would be Franz Joseph, another one living in a different world. And let's get to the other side of the fence. There's Tsar Nicholas II. Also, a very young man when he took over the throne. He wept when he first heard his father die. Because he knew he's not ready. And he wasn't ready. He wasn't a terribly intelligent man. He wasn't a quick-witted man. He did, which is a rarity amongst monarchs, love his wife and kids. Usually marriages were political marriages. You just somebody you have to have an heir with. But totally inadequate. Totally inadequate to be the monarch, the autocratic leader of the biggest country in the world. And one of the most important duties of a monarch is to have an heir. In Russia, after Catherine the Great, they changed. And all the noblemen got together and said, no more women to be czar. So he needed a son. He had 4 daughters. Finally had a son. And to give you an idea of his mental capabilities and what he thought was fun, just an idea, same kind of thing about shaking hands. This man is responsible for this massive country. His favorite strategic game, and he loves strategic games like Bach, where you ready for it? It's a game some of you might not understand. So, if you don't understand, maybe, it's going to be tough. It's called pushy shoving. It's already sounds pretty complex, right? Imagine a couch with no arms. And his 4 daughters and his wife would be sitting on the couch. You got it? Am I going too fast? We good? So get the strategic mind. Then the czar would kind of sit next to the couch and kind of push his way onto the couch so somebody falls off. Okay, so, no, wait. And then they have got to get on the couch. Do you go on the right side? Do you go on the left side? This is for you, right? Do you go in the middle? That's strategy. Okay, that just makes me laugh, but was it too much?
Was that just for fun, or was that for a strength thing?
It was all for fun. And he thought it was like, really, we did play for hours. And it appears though he wasn't doing just that fun with his little girls. No, this was like a big deal for him. It was competitive. You kept scoring. So his son couldn't play. Why? Huh? What disease did he have from his hemophilia? From his right hand, hemophilia. Where a cut would not stop bleeding. The big thing is not a cut, it's bruise. Internal bleeding just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. And I guess the pain is unreal. A fall would make him bedridden for 2 or 3 months. Because it would swell up and nothing would stop the swelling. Press against the bone, the nerves, cut off blood vessels. If you got a bruise here, kill it. Don't even think about a bruise in the neck. Bruise here could kill it. And sometimes it would start ripping apart blood vessels. So little pieces would start going down the veins and blood clot. So this was incredibly deadly. And they kept that secret because they didn't want to have people know that this god on earth, the czar, might have a flaw. But then, this mad monk could this be the mad monk? No! You're not the mad monk. I thought you might be the mad monk. Oh, it's cute. What do you want? Put it in the basket. Hey. So, well then, let me see real quick. Okay. Okay.
Stapler?
Oh, stapler. That's asking way too much. And so the mad monk. Go ahead and leave it by that so fast. He, for some reason, his presence made the son feel better. Now, for some reason, when he arrived in St. Petersburg, and so they took him in. They took him in. This mad monk was named Rasputin. And Rasputin would be with the family soon, dispensing advice. Some good, some bad advice. But the thing about Rasputin was this. In the family, he would be this trusted member who could save the son. He could be there. In fact, the Tsarina demanded he was there for Alexa, the son. But then he'd go out in St. Petersburg and he would drink more and carouse more than any human could do. Just this, so all this debauchery outside, and it would come back into the monarch, or come back into the palace, the summer winter palace. And people begin to think the monarchy might be decrepit if a man like this is dispensing advice and maybe even having an affair with the Tsarina. Now that's Tsarina. Now, Tsarina, yeah. You like that? So, and nobody knew why he was there because nobody knew about the son. And the point about that is you have this inadequate man, and that shows the problems of monarchy, so desperate to keep the heir to the throne that they let this man, you see the instabilities come in. There was a revolution after the humiliation of the Russo-Japanese War. Revolution after the humiliation. That was pretty good. And so, that's just amazing, isn't it? King George, the Tsar. Just a little bit different eyes, right? That's creepy. So, 3, imperialism. All these countries were getting, building empires. Remember, the United States is too. All around the world. The thing about empires is this. Once you start building an empire, and it's not just in Africa or Asia, there are huge empires in Europe. Central Europe's dominated by Germany, Austria, and Russia. The Ottoman Empire used to be all of this area until they fought their way out, mostly in the 19th century. Empires, to control them, you need armies. You have armies running into other empires with armies, and what are you going to have? War. And so the fight for empire and wealth and profit is going to lead to war. That was one of the arguments against the United States in the Spanish-American War. We become an empire, we'll have war after war. And by the way, they would be exactly right. We've had war after war after war after war. Especially now. I mean, we are fighting in 8 different countries right now. And that's the thing about empire. If you fight in that many countries, a lot of times people don't even know. Which is terrifying. And some of you are like, I didn't know. So, with that, look at Africa. In 1879, except for a few spots, Africa was still independent. By 1914, every single place in Africa, which is massive, if you ever draw Africa, they always make it a little bit smaller, proportional. Like you see this map right here, and Africa looks pretty small proportionally. It's a lot bigger proportionally than that. And then, you know, it didn't even move. Oh, then why is the Constitution? That would happen to one of you. You'd be down crying and egging and ramming against her. But not me. I'm tough. I'm old. My nerve endings don't function anymore. So with that, by this, virtually every place in Africa had been taken except for Ethiopia, which fought off an Italian invasion. And are you pushing against that chair and sliding backwards? Yeah, okay. And then acting like you're not doing anything? I think that's pretty cool. And then Liberia. And Liberia, remember, that's the one, you remember the American Colonization Society? And the thought was, we don't want slavery, but we want to be a white republic. So we'll free slaves and then take them back to Africa, which of course didn't make much sense. But they would maintain somewhat of independence. This was all French. Egypt was so technically part of the Ottomans, but Britain ran it. All in Red Britain. Here, Portuguese. Germany even got into it, the Cameroons, Togoland was going to become Tanganyika. All these areas. And to give you an idea of what happened, Britain and Germany almost went war over this area between Uganda and Kenya and Tanganyika. For no other reason except for the fact that they wanted to under a British or German flag. It's ours. We got it. France and Britain came literally within, well, men pointing weapons at each other, fight over the Sudan. Same thing here along the Niger River. So empires led to war. And so that is nationalism, and you have all these multi-ethnic empires right there. And there are a lot of people who live in these empires or in the colonies that don't want to be part of these empires. Nationalism. And nationalism, we talked about this before, and the first idea is this intense pride or love of your country, devotion to your state. And nationalism is you love your country, why? Yeah, I'm an American because I'm American, therefore I love America because I'm an American because I love America. And it goes on and on and on. Remember, patriotism is sometimes used to mean nationalism, but they're not synonymous. Patriotism is love of your country for what it stands for and what it represents. That can be good or bad things, depending on your point of view. But nationalism, I just love my country. A few things in World War I, but especially World War II, would give nationalism kind of a bad name. And it's a little bit uncomfortable when people use it today. It's come out a few times recently. And then it kind of makes sense. And the French have a country for the French, right? France, or Britain, Spain. But all these different colors are different ethnic groups. Those are the biggest ones broken apart by language. And they don't have their country. There's no Poland. The Poles live in 3 empires, Russia, German, and Austria. And nationalism also means political independence from my group. These groups that don't have a state want a state. The Poles want a Poland. The Czechs want a Czech. Czech Republic, Czechia, I guess it's called now, or the Slovaks. Croats, Slovenians, Serbs, Bosnians, Transylvanians, Ukrainians, Lithuanians, and mixed down through all these are German immigrants and a significant population of Jews. All live in these areas and they want independence. By the way, this is kind of a weird country. You have kind of German people here, or French people here, and Dutch Germans here in Belgium. They just about broke up into 2 countries 2 years ago. Now they speak French on one side and kind of Dutch on the other half. Dutch is a pretty amazing language.
What's the difference between White Russians and Great Russians?
None. Slight difference in language. But remember, we had that racial science at that time, and they said there were 39 different races. And so they were saying these are all different races, which is just patently ridiculous. But it's a way to divide people up. And the biggest ethnic group in all these areas here, and most of the people here, are Slavs. And there's a growing Slavic nationalistic group. And if you look at that, what's the largest Slavic country? Russia. But there are Slavs everywhere. Now you notice I did not say Hungarians. Hungarians are Magyars, and they came right in and conquered this area. Austrians are Germans. And Czechs are closer to the German language, but it's just an ethnic group. It's just broken up by the language. I mean, racial differences are non-existent anyways, but these are purely by language. And the Slavs more and more want their own country, and so many Slavs live within the Austrian Empire. They want, the idea was a pan-Slavic, pan means essentially a unified Slavic state. I don't know why I put Slavic nationalism again, you don't have to write that down again. But there's more and more talk about Slavs breaking away and forming their own country, and the focus of much of the anger of these Slavic nationalists was Austria. Because here's the Austrian Empire, the red are Austrians, the green are Hungarians, almost all the rest are Slavs, under the command of a German king, Kaiser Franz Joseph. There's some Italians here. Italy claims this and all this. I mean, there's all kinds of different claims. And they have slowly but surely begun to take all these areas. And they want independence. And that became the big thing about Franz Joseph. How do I keep this empire together? An iron fist, or I'll let them have some self-rule. And they begin to fight for independence. And so the Austrians were very distrustful of anybody who might help the Slavs become independent. Meaning what country? Russia. And that leads to a brand new country just south of Austria fought their way out of the Ottoman Empire, Serbia. And they wanted a large Serbia, greater Serbia. What they thought is, let's unify all the Slavs here under the Serbian king. Serbia was one of the most violent states. That's why they're drawn as a pig in that one map. And Serbia fought a number of wars. For example, a few years before World War I, they committed regicide, which is killing their king. You know how they did it? Push him out of a 5-story window onto a cast iron fence. Split him right in half. And people rejoiced. That's a little bit brutal. And they were known as this brutal, violent state. But they're Slavs. And they began to intrigue into Austria to get the Slavs to rebel against Austria. So what is Austria thinking? We got to get rid of Serbia. But if we get rid of Slavic Serbia, who is probably going to be the only friend of Serbia? Russia. And Russia wants Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. So they want access to the sea. So Russia wants this. In 1908, you don't need to write this down, I'll just tell you. Austria formally annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they had a protectorate. And Russia was furious. They actually talked about war, but they were weakened after the Russo-Japanese War and decided not to. But the Tsar, who was very insecure, made it clear, if something like this happens again with Austria, we won't back down. And it'll happen again, 1914. So nationalism is going to be brewing up in here. There would be two wars. I thought this is just amazing. Look how much this would change. Look at Austria, then look. And if the map of Europe after World War II would change, and today it's different. In fact, it is still brand new. Oh, someone there, thank you. I didn't. All right, it does. And you have to, a brand new country right here, literally created yesterday. Anyone know? North Macedonia. Literally yesterday. Isn't that amazing? So the point is nationalism is still a major issue there to this day. So, one more empire. Look at the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is in dark orange in 1914. They lost these places in the light orange before World War I. All of this was Austria. Lauren, thank you. You do good work. All these lost to France, Italy, Britain. Britain just basically took Yemen in 1913, right before the war began. Kuwait in 1899. Yeah, we're going to sit down. Oh, life stuff. Oh, you left your chair out there. Okay, I'll clean up your mess. And but what countries are going to come out of the Ottoman Empire? The Middle East was created after World War I, out of the Ottoman Empire. Like, what country's right here? What's it? That's Iraq. And by the way, no, it wasn't. And here's the deal. Now, this is me actually being stern and very serious. It's time to know this stuff. It's time to know. Not little kids anymore. It's time to know. The United States invaded there in 2003, and 1 million Iraqis died. Over 4,000 Americans died, and some 20 times that number were wounded. Now it's time to know those things. Now, not being stern anymore. All right, it's time. It's time to start knowing where these things are. We are still there. We are still there. What country's here, by the way? That's Iran. What country's right here? We have troops right now. That was created and became a French colony. Yes, they're still bitter about that. What country's right here? Lebanon. Here. Here. Jordan. Transjordan. So we have one person knowing them all. That's very good, though. What's here? And Yemen came out of this too, and there's right now genocide in Yemen, and the United States is contributing to that. Hey, it's time to know these things. Because if we're bombing things as a country and people don't know it, then we just do whatever and people die. Now you can make the argument whether or not it's good or bad, but not knowing it is terrifying. Now it's time to know these things. But thank you. You saved this class. Now, not being sure, that's a big deal. All this will come out of that. All this out of World War I. You get the point of World War I is kind of a big deal. One more little bit of nationalism. Let's jump. Oh, there'd be 2 Balkan wars that would be fought. 2 of them. They nearly erupted into the great Armageddon they all feared. It nearly happened. 2 of them. And basically, it was all these new countries fought Turkey in the first one, the Ottoman Empire, and then they all fought Bulgaria in the second one. But they didn't erupt. But it was right on the edge. The only reason I'm saying that is the Balkans were a powder keg, ready to explode, and that's where Armageddon would happen. And I'm calling that because that's what they all called it then. And the last thing we have to get for today is German nationalism. Germany, though, had a very nationalistic feel because in 1871, this hodgepodge of little kingdoms and principalities became the German Empire. And they were very, very different. And they made up a German mythology, a German common identity. A common identity. They made up Germanic gods, where they took some Norwegian, Norse gods, a few German legends, kind of lumped them all together. The whole idea was, okay, Bavarians and Prussians might be different, but we're all Germans and we're great. So they made this up. They even made up a fake race. What? You ever heard of Aryans? Pure made-up garbage. This Aryan race. Of course, most of the races are garbage, we mentioned before, but they made that up to say we're something different. And the whole idea would be there's something special about being Germans. And by the way, if we're special, what is everybody else? And jealous. And so they made all this up. By the way, there is a country of the Aryans. Anyone know it? It means Aryan. Iran. Central Asians are Aryans. And it has nothing to do with Germans, but it's just, yeah. It used to be called Persia, and they made a big deal. We are the country of Aryans. And they named this new thing culture. And everybody all their enemies were jealous of their culture. And here's a little thing that the German in Britain had in World War I to say that he's secretly from Germany. It's actually kind of cool in a scary way. Culture. And here it's called the Niederwald, but this is like Germania. Remember Columbia? You know, those pictures I showed you? This is Germania, this woman who represented all Germany. This was made to represent German unifications on the Rhine River in 1871. And I'm going to tell you one more story real fast. So, remember I talked about the food, I talked about, you know, like cutthroat competition. You speed up the assembly line, do things like that. That's where you might get some. You don't exactly know. That's one of the reasons why the progressives want to reform. Now, I had an experience once. This might shock a lot of you, but I used to be younger. And I lived in a house in college in Billings. My junior year, I moved in a house with 5 other guys, which it was immaculate, clean, friendly. I cannot believe I lived that way. But we lived in this big house, 5 of us. 3 of them graduated from Capital. That was just one of those strange, ironic twists. But this was at a time, and it's so weird to think about it, but I was trying to gain weight. And I know it's so weird to think about now, but so whenever my mom would come up from Miles City, we'd go to the store and get a bunch of food that's easy to make, right? So we get canned, every kind of canned food, but canned chili. The canned chili was good because it was really filling. I'm not saying it was good for you, it's just good. You know, chili is kind of this vague, reddish brown sauce, right? And so I remember one time I was talking to one of my roommates, Will. And I'm talking to Will, and I dumped the can of chili in the saucepan. I'm heating it up and kind of stirring it with a spoon. And we're talking, and all of a sudden the spoon felt odd, heavy. That's one of the way I can describe it, just heavy. And so I picked it up, and once I pulled it out, he goes, "Oh my God!" And I go, "Ah!" Around the spoon were wrapped 2 worms. And the worms were about, okay, every year they get longer, but they were a good 6-7 inches long. And they weren't moving, but they very well could have been alive. They didn't really talk. And they're covered with the chili. And I agree with it. I want them ground up. Right? Yeah. which should tell you why they put gravy. But that's when you go too fast and things happen. So so immediately we took the worm, we put him in a sandwich bag and showed all my friends. Look at the worm! Give a big joke. Well, we went to Albertsons where we bought this and went to the little courtesy desk. And I remember, I go, I got to return something. He goes, what? Let me just finish. I dropped the worms on there, and the guy there goes, ah, worms! And he gets on the speakers for the store and goes, there are worms in the chili. And the manager comes up, don't yell that. And so everyone came and looked at the worms, and he goes, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know, do something, there's worms. So I filled out a little form, it was Nally's chili. And I said, I remember writing down worms and chili. And sent it off, and he gave me like $1.50 refund for the chili. And this became a good story for weeks. 3 weeks later, I'm in my house. Somebody knocked on the door. It was a mailman. And it was registered mail, so I had to sign for it. And I said, I just assumed like a package or a letter. So let me get it. He unfolded a cart, put 5 big boxes on, and started wheeling the boxes with Nally's on the side. 5 boxes of worms. And so we had all chili. Oh, it was delicious too. We got the wormy kind. I have never been able to eat a chili, but here's the best part. All my roommates knew about it. They all saw the worms, and they all ate it. Okay, so. Goodbye. Wow. But it doesn't mean all your chili is lacking of worms. And I complain if it doesn't. The point is, you cut corners, and that could happen. Oh, thank you.
The only chili I like is vegetarian chili.
I don't like any chili.
It's it tastes the exact same as normal chili. What? How do I have
No, I have vegetarian. I like it. I like homemade chili, but yeah.
I don't even like cheese.
You need paper. We have a task. Oh, I have to get the rest of my desk. I can't see this out. Mr. Yola's here.
You only have one desk.
harass your students?
I do.